In the heart of the bustling city of Lagos, there was a prominent businesswoman named Mrs. Oladapo. She was known for her ruthlessness in the corporate world, where her iron will and unyielding nature earned her respect and fear. Her home life mirrored her professional demeanor, as she demanded perfection and obedience from everyone around her, especially her domestic staff. One day, Mrs. Adenick hired a new maid named Amara, a quiet young woman from a rural village. Amara was diligent and hardworking, but no matter how much she tried, she could never meet Mrs. Adenick's impossibly high standards. Her efforts were often met with harsh words and cruel punishments. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Mrs. Adenick found a small stain on one of her expensive dresses. Enraged, she summoned Amara and berated her mercilessly. Despite Amara's tearful apologies, Mrs. Adenick's anger did not abate. In a fit of fury, she struck Amara and burnt her arm with a hot iron, leaving a painful and permanent mark. Amara, in deep pain and humiliation, did not retaliate. She silently tended to her wound and continued her duties, her spirit seemingly unbroken. However, there was something about Amara's composure that unsettled Mrs. Adenick, a hint of strength and resilience that belied her meek appearance. Several weeks later, Mrs. Adenick was invited to a prestigious charity gala, an event attended by the city's elite. The guest of honor was a prominent philanthropist who had recently gained attention for her efforts in rural education and women's empowerment. Mrs. Adenick, always eager to expand her network, was excited to meet this influential figure. As the night progressed, the master of ceremonies introduced the guest of honor. Mrs. Adenick's heart skipped a beat when she saw Amara step onto the stage, her simple maid's attire replaced by a stunning gown, her presence commanding and dignified. The crowd erupted in applause as Amara began to speak, sharing her story of overcoming adversity, including the abuse she had suffered at the hands of an employer in Lagos. She spoke of how she had used that experience to fuel her passion for change, establishing foundations and programs to protect and empower women like herself. Mrs. Adenick sat frozen in her seat, her mind racing. The revelation was a profound shock. Amara, the maid she had abused and burnt, was not just a resilient woman, but a leader and a symbol of hope for many. The guilt and shame washed over her in waves as she realized the gravity of her actions. After the speech, Mrs. Adenick mustered the courage to approach Amara. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and begged for forgiveness. Amara looked down at her, a mixture of sorrow and understanding in her eyes. She reached out, gently lifting Mrs. Adenick to her feet. "I forgave you long ago," Amara said softly, "but it is not my forgiveness you need. It is the forgiveness of those you have wronged and the strength to change your ways." From that day forward, Mrs. Adenick's life took a dramatic turn. She devoted herself to supporting Amara's causes, using her influence and resources to advocate for the rights and protection of domestic workers. Her journey of redemption was long and arduous, but it was a path she was determined to follow. In the end, Mrs. Adenick learned that true strength and success were not measured by power or wealth, but by the kindness and respect with which one treats others. And through her transformation, she and Amara forged an unlikely alliance, working together to create a better future for those who had been silenced and oppressed. As the years passed, Mrs. Adenick and Amara's collaboration yielded profound changes. They established a foundation named Hope and Dignity, dedicated to providing legal aid, education, and safe shelters for domestic workers who suffered abuse. The foundation also offered training programs, helping women acquire skills to secure better employment opportunities. One notable project was the Sunrise Academy, a vocational school that offered courses in various trades and entrepreneurship. The academy aimed to equip women with the tools they needed to become financially independent and to break the cycle of poverty and exploitation. Mrs. Adenick, leveraging her business acumen, played a pivotal role in shaping the curriculum and securing funding from corporate sponsors. The foundation's work garnered widespread attention and accolades. Media outlets covered their success stories, highlighting how many women had transformed their lives through the programs. Public sentiment began to shift, and there was a growing awareness of the plight of domestic workers. Laws were amended, and new regulations were introduced to protect their rights, largely due to the relentless advocacy led by Amara and supported by Mrs. Adenick. Their partnership, however, was not without challenges. There were moments of tension and disagreement, as Mrs. Adenick's old habits occasionally resurfaced. Yet, Amara's patience and wisdom always found a way to bridge the gap. She remained a constant reminder of the values they both now cherished: compassion, humility, and justice. One evening, during a gala organized by the foundation to celebrate its 5th anniversary, Amara and Mrs. Adenick stood side by side, addressing the audience. The room was filled with supporters, beneficiaries, and dignitaries who had witnessed the positive impact of their work. Amara spoke first, her voice steady and powerful. "Tonight, we celebrate not just our achievements, but the spirit of resilience and the unbreakable will of every woman who has walked through our doors seeking a better life. This foundation is a testament to the power of redemption and the possibility of change." When it was Mrs. Adenick's turn, she took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room filled with hopeful faces. "I once believed that strength came from control and fear, but I have learned that true strength lies in compassion, in lifting others up, and in seeking forgiveness. This journey has been one of profound transformation, and I am grateful for the chance to make amends and to contribute to this noble cause." The applause was thunderous, and many in the audience were moved to tears. The evening ended on a high note, with renewed commitments and generous donations that would further the foundation's mission. As the gala wound down, Mrs. Adenick and Amara found a quiet corner to reflect on their journey. "You have changed my life in ways I could never have imagined," Mrs. Adenick said, her voice tinged with emotion. "Thank you for giving me the chance to make things right." Amara smiled warmly. "We have both grown and learned, and together, we have made a difference. That is what truly matters." Their bond, forged in the crucible of pain and redemption, had become unbreakable. They continued to work tirelessly, driven by a shared vision of a world where every woman could live with dignity and hope. Through their efforts, they left an indelible mark on society, proving that even the darkest of hearts could find light and that true change was always possible. Years flowed by like a gentle river, with Amara and Mrs. Adenick's influence growing steadily. Hope and dignity expanded its reach beyond Lagos, touching countless lives across Nigeria and eventually spreading its wings to neighboring countries. Their foundation became a beacon of hope and a model for other initiatives focused on social justice and women's empowerment. One day, as Mrs. Adenick sat in her office overlooking the busy streets of Lagos, she received a letter. It was from a woman named Fatima, a former maid who had suffered horrendous abuse but had been rescued and rehabilitated through their foundation. Fatima was now running her own tailoring business, employing other women in similar circumstances. The letter detailed her gratitude and shared news of her recent award for community service. Fatima's story was a testament to the profound impact of their work. Mrs. Adenick felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she read the letter. It reminded her of how far she had come from the person she once was. Her thoughts drifted to Amara, whose unwavering commitment and guidance had been pivotal in this journey. She decided it was time to take their mission to the next level. That evening, she visited Amara at her home, a modest but cozy place filled with warmth and the scent of freshly cooked food. Over dinner, Mrs. Adanek shared her idea. Amara, it's time we take hope and dignity global. We've changed so many lives here, but there are countless more who need our help. Amara looked thoughtful, then nodded. I agree. We have the experience and the network to make a global impact. Let's build a blueprint that can be adapted to different cultures and societies. They spent the next few months traveling, meeting with international NGOs, government officials, and community leaders. They spoke at global forums, sharing their model and encouraging others to adopt similar frameworks. Their speeches were filled with stories of resilience and transformation, inspiring many to join their cause. During a conference in New York, they were approached by an influential philanthropist named Jonathan Hayes. He had heard about their work and was deeply impressed. Your foundation has achieved remarkable success. I would like to help you scale this globally, he said, offering substantial financial support and his network of contacts. With Jonathan's backing, Hope and Dignity International was born. They set up headquarters in major cities around the world, each branch tailored to address the unique challenges faced by women in different regions. They partnered with local organizations, ensuring that their programs were culturally relevant and effective. Back in Nigeria, the original foundation continued to thrive. Sunrise Academy expanded its curriculum, introducing courses in technology and entrepreneurship. Graduates went on to start businesses, lead organizations, and advocate for change in their communities. Amara and Mrs. Adenek's efforts did not go unnoticed. They received numerous awards and honors, including a joint nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. Despite the accolades, they remained grounded, always focusing on the work that needed to be done. One particularly poignant moment came when they visited a small village in Uganda, where a branch of their foundation had recently opened. They met with women who had escaped domestic slavery and were now learning skills that would enable them to build independent lives. As they listened to the women's stories, Mrs. Adenek felt a deep sense of purpose. During a quiet moment, she turned to Amara and said, I never imagined that the worst mistake of my life would lead to the most meaningful work I would ever do. Thank you for showing me the way. Amara smiled, her eyes reflecting the same compassion that had always guided her. Change begins with a single step, Adenek. Together, we've taken many, and there are many more to take. Their journey was far from over, but the legacy they were building would endure. Through their relentless dedication and the countless lives they touched, Amara and Mrs. Adenek proved that redemption and transformation were possible, and that together they could create a world where every woman could rise with dignity.